Because, he stopped, then decided to offer a truth that existed alongside his lies. Because the moment I met you, I felt like helping you was the most important thing I could possibly do. I can't explain it better than that. Ariana studied him for a long moment, her expression cycling through doubt and hope and something that looked disturbingly like recognition despite her amnesia about the attack. I feel it too, she admitted quietly, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment at the confession. This connection, I guess. Whenever you're near, my wolf calms down in ways she doesn't with anyone else. My body responds to you like it knows you even though my mind insists we're strangers. Is that normal? Or is it something to do with the venom, some kind of side effect of nearly dying? It's not the venom, Tyler replied, his voice rough with emotion he couldn't quite suppress. It's weird. The celebration hall blazed with golden light and laughter that echoed off stone walls decorated with silver banners bearing the wolf emblem of their pack. Ariana stood at the edge of the crowded room, her heart hammering against her ribs with the kind of nervous anticipation that came from wanting something so desperately that the mere possibility of having it felt dangerous. She'd spent hours preparing for this moment, her dark hair cascading in carefully arranged waves down her back, her dress a deep emerald that complemented her olive skin and made her gray eyes appear almost luminous in the flickering candlelight. Everything about tonight was supposed to be perfect, magical, the culmination of years of secret longing finally given voice through courage she'd had to scrape together from the depths of her soul. Across the room, Marcus laughed at something his friend said, his blonde hair catching the light as he turned, and Ariana felt her breath catch the way it always did when she looked at him. He was everything the pack valued, strong, confident, born to a prominent family with connections that stretched across multiple territories. She'd loved him since they were teenagers, through the awkward years of training and pack hierarchy lessons, through the gradual realization that what she felt wasn't simple admiration but something deeper and more consuming that made her heart ache whenever he was near. Tonight she'd finally told him. Finally confessed the feelings she'd been carrying like precious stones hidden close to her chest, terrified of damage but desperate to finally share their weight with the person they were meant for. She'd pulled him aside during a quiet moment between dances, her voice trembling as she'd spoken words that felt both liberating and terrifying, laying her heart bare with the kind of vulnerability that required absolute trust in the recipient's capacity for kindness. Marcus had stared at her for what felt like eternity, his expression cycling through surprise and discomfort before settling on something that looked disturbingly like pity mixed with embarrassment. Ariana, he'd said slowly, carefully, like addressing a child who'd suggested something impossibly naive. You're sweet and everything but you're not really my type. I'm sorry if I gave you the wrong impression somehow, but I've never thought of you that way. I thought we were just friends. The rejection had been bad enough, but what came next destroyed her completely. Marcus had returned to his group of friends, and within minutes Ariana heard the laughter, loud, mocking, deliberately meant to carry across the room to where she stood frozen in humiliation. She caught fragments of conversation that cut like knives. Can you believe she actually thought, she's okay looking but way too intense, desperate much? The celebration hall that had seemed so beautiful moments ago suddenly felt suffocating, the golden light too bright, the laughter too loud, every face turned in her direction holding judgment or pity or worse, amusement at her expense. Ariana fled through the nearest exit, her vision blurring with tears she refused to let fall while anyone could still see her, her breath coming in ragged gasps that had nothing to do with physical exertion and everything to do with the kind of emotional pain that made breathing feel like a conscious effort requiring more strength than she possessed. The night air hit her face with shocking cold that provided momentary relief from the heat of embarrassment burning through her entire body. She ran without direction, letting her feet carry her away from the celebration and toward the forest path that bordered their pack's territory, needing distance and darkness and solitude to process the humiliation that felt like it might actually kill her if she didn't escape the witnessing eyes of everyone she'd grown up with. The forest welcomed her with shadows that felt merciful after the harsh exposure of the celebration hall. Ariana stumbled along the familiar path, her dress catching on branches she normally would have avoided with the grace that came from years of running these woods in both human and wolf form. But tonight her coordination was compromised by tears she could no longer contain, by sobs that racked her body with the kind of grief that felt disproportionate to simple romantic rejection but was actually mourning the death of hope she'd been nurturing for years. She didn't hear the movement behind her until it was too late. Didn't sense the predator tracking her steps until massive jaws clamped around her shoulder with force that sent agony exploding through her nervous system in ways that transcended anything she'd experienced before. Ariana screamed, the sound tearing from her throat with primal terror as she was lifted off her feet and shaken like prey in the grip of something far more powerful than any normal wolf. The Lycan, because that's what held her, not a werewolf but something larger and more feral and infinitely more dangerous, was enormous, easily twice the size of the biggest wolves in her pack. His fur was dark as midnight, his eyes glowing with luminescence that suggested madness or grief or something equally devastating to rational thought. Moonlight filtered through the trees and caught on claws that were already soaked with her blood, on teeth that had pierced through her shoulder and into muscle and possibly bone with the casual efficiency of a predator who killed without effort or conscience. Pain consumed her awareness, narrowing her world to the sensation of being torn apart while still conscious, still aware of every moment of violation as supernatural venom flooded her system alongside the physical trauma. The Lycan released her shoulder only to slash across her ribs with claws that opened her flesh like paper, and Ariana felt herself flying backward from the force of the blow, her body tumbling through air that suddenly offered no resistance or protection. The cliff edge appeared too late for her to do anything except register its presence before she was falling, plummeting through darkness toward the sound of waves crashing against rocks far below. The last thing she remembered before consciousness abandoned her entirely was the cold shock of seawater closing over her head, pulling her under with the same indifferent force that had characterized the entire nightmare sequence of events that had transformed her evening from hopeful to horrific in the span of minutes. The ocean was merciless but somehow less cruel than the Lycan had been. The waves battered her unconscious form against rocks that should have killed her, dragged her through currents that should have pulled her under permanently, but somehow, through luck or fate or the stubborn refusal of her supernatural healing to let her die despite catastrophic injuries, deposited her on a beach that marked the boundary between supernatural territories and human settlements. She woke to sunlight burning through her closed eyelids and pain that suggested every nerve in her body was competing to see which could transmit the most intense distress signals to her barely functioning brain. Ariana tried to move and discovered her body had opinions about that plan, none of them favorable. Her shoulder throbbed with the deep ache of wounds that were healing too slowly, her ribs screamed protest at even the shallow breaths she was taking, and underneath all the physical damage she felt something else, something foreign and wrong moving through her bloodstream like infection seeking to rewrite her DNA from the inside out. "Don't try to move yet," a male voice said from somewhere above her, gentle and concerned in ways that made Ariana's defensive instincts flare despite her current inability to do anything about potential threats. "You're safe. You're in my home. I found you on the beach 3 days ago, you've been unconscious since then. I'm Justin, and I promise I'm not going to hurt you." Ariana managed to force her eyes open, squinting against light that felt aggressively bright after days of darkness. The face that came into focus belonged to a young man probably close to her own age, with warm brown eyes and dark hair that fell across his forehead in ways that suggested he'd been running his hands through it repeatedly. He looked human at first glance, no obvious supernatural markers, no sense signature that triggered recognition in her wolf, but something about him felt off in ways she couldn't quite identify through the haze of pain and confusion. "What happened to me?" Ariana managed, her voice coming out rough and damaged. "Where am I? Who?" She tried to sit up and immediately regretted the decision as agony lanced through her torso with enough force to make her vision gray at the edges. "Easy," Justin said, his hands coming up to support her shoulders with surprising strength for someone who appeared entirely human. "You were attacked by something, we're not sure what yet. You have bite marks and claw wounds that suggest a large predator, but the pattern doesn't match any normal animal. You also have," he hesitated, clearly choosing his words carefully, "some kind of venom in your system. Something supernatural. My uncle has been working to stabilize you, but we need more information to properly treat whatever's happening to you." As if summoned by the mention, an elderly man appeared in the doorway of the room where Ariana found herself. He was clearly Lycan. She could sense it now despite her compromised state, could recognize the particular energy signature that marked him as one of the ancient bloodlines. His weathered face held concern mixed with something that looked disturbingly like recognition, and when he spoke his voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "The bite is changing you," he said without preamble, apparently deciding direct honesty was preferable to gentle evasion. "Whoever attacked you wasn't just trying to kill you, they marked you. Created a bond that's now poisoning your system because you're not receiving the blood of the one who bit you. Without that, the venom will eventually kill you despite your body's attempts to heal. You have perhaps 2 weeks, maybe 3 if you're lucky, before the transformation your body is trying to complete turns toxic and shuts down your organs one by one." The words hit Ariana like physical blows, each revelation worse than the last. She was dying. had been marked by some unknown Lycan whose identity she couldn't remember. Had perhaps 2 weeks to find her attacker and somehow convince him to give her his blood or face a death that would be slow and agonizing as her own biology turned against her. "I don't remember," she whispered, her hands trembling as she tried to process information that felt impossible despite the evidence of wounds still healing across her body. "I remember running from something that hurt me. A celebration. Rejection. Then pain and falling in water. But the face, the Lycan who attacked me, I can't see it. My memories are fractured, incomplete. How am I supposed to find someone I can't even remember?" Justin and his uncle exchanged glances that suggested they'd already discussed this problem extensively during the 3 days she'd been unconscious. "We'll help you," Justin said firmly, his expression holding determination that seemed excessive for someone who'd just met her. "We'll track down whoever did this. We'll find them and get you the blood you need to survive. I promise you're not going to die from this." What Ariana didn't know, what Justin carefully avoided mentioning, was that he had his own desperate reasons for wanting to help her. He was werewolf-born, heir to a pack that had been stolen from him by an uncle who'd murdered his way to the alpha position and then sealed away Justin's powers to prevent challenge to his authority. 4 years Justin had been trapped in this half-existence, aware of the wolf inside him but unable to access its strength or healing or any of the abilities that should have been his birthright. But when he'd found Ariana on the beach, when he'd helped his Lycan uncle treat her wounds, he'd felt something shift. A stirring in the sealed parts of his soul that suggested proximity to her was somehow weakening whatever magical locks his murderous uncle had installed. If Ariana was the key to restoring his powers, Justin would move heaven and earth to keep her alive and close. It wasn't entirely selfless, but it wasn't entirely selfish either. He genuinely wanted to help her, genuinely felt protective of this broken girl who'd been attacked and abandoned. That his own salvation might be tied to hers was just fortunate coincidence that made his determination to save her even more absolute. Miles away in the city that marked neutral territory between various supernatural factions, Tyler stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse apartment and stared out at lights that blurred together in his peripheral vision while his mind replayed the same nightmare sequence of events that had been haunting him for the past week. He was Lycan King, born to power and responsibility that should have made him careful, strategic, incapable of the kind of catastrophic mistake that could destroy innocent lives. But grief had made him reckless, and rage had made him feral, and the combination had led to him attacking a young werewolf who'd done nothing except have the misfortune of crossing his path when he was least capable of rational thought. His sister's death had broken something fundamental in Tyler's ability to maintain the careful control that Lycan royalty required. She'd been murdered by werewolf extremists who'd decided that Lycans were abominations that needed to be purged from supernatural communities, and her body had been left on pack borders as a message about what happened to those who claimed authority over territories that werewolves believed belonged exclusively to them. The grief had been overwhelming, but underneath it burned rage so intense it had literally transformed him, pushed him into Lycan form without conscious decision and sent him running into the forest seeking anything that could serve as target for the violence building in his chest. He'd attacked without thinking, without questioning, without even bothering to identify whether the wolf he'd scented was threat or innocent bystander. Just launched himself at her with claws and teeth and all the fury of a king who'd lost the person he loved most in the world. And then, horror. Recognition too late that she was young and terrified and hadn't done anything except be in the wrong place at precisely the wrong time. He tried to stop himself, tried to pull back, but momentum and madness had carried him forward and his bite had landed and his claws had struck and she'd gone flying off the cliff before he could even process what he'd done. Tyler had spent hours searching the coastline for her body, desperate to find her and confirm death or somehow miraculously discover she'd survived. But the ocean had taken her, and eventually his Gamma Zelda had found him and forced him to leave before his presence in werewolf territory created diplomatic incidents that would escalate existing tensions into actual warfare. They'd fled to the city, and Tyler had been living in this penthouse ever since, trying to bury his guilt and his grief and his absolute certainty that he'd murdered an innocent girl because he'd been too consumed by rage to maintain even basic control over his actions. "You can't keep torturing yourself," Zelda said from the doorway, her voice holding the particular blend of sympathy and exasperation that came from being both loyal Gamma and longtime friend. "What happened was tragic, but you were grieving. You weren't in your right mind. And we don't even know for certain she died. You never found a body. It's possible she survived. She went off a cliff into the ocean after I tore open her shoulder and ribs," Tyler replied flatly, his reflection in the window showing a man who looked like he'd aged years in the span of a week. Even with supernatural healing, those injuries combined with the fall in the water, No one survives that, Zelda. I killed her. I'm a king who murdered an innocent werewolf because I couldn't control my grief. That's not something I get to move past or forgive myself for. His phone buzzed with incoming call that the screen identified as Justin, his best friend since childhood, one of the few people Tyler trusted absolutely despite the strange circumstances of Justin's exile from his birth pack. They'd met years ago during a business conference that had brought together supernatural leaders from various factions, and something about Justin's quiet determination and underlying anger at injustice had resonated with Tyler's own frustrations about supernatural politics. They'd built a friendship that had survived distance and political complications, and Justin remained one of Tyler's most trusted confidants. Tyler, Justin's voice came through the phone with unusual intensity. I need your help. It's urgent. Can you meet me tomorrow? There's someone I need you to meet and, this is going to sound strange, but I think she might have information about Lycan activity in werewolf territories. She was attacked badly and we're trying to track down who did it. Tyler's blood turned to ice in his veins, premonition hitting him with the force of physical impact. What do you mean attacked? When? Where? About a week ago near the werewolf pack territories on the coast. I found her on the beach, unconscious and badly wounded. Bite marks and claw wounds from what looks like a Lycan, though we haven't been able to identify who yet. She doesn't remember much. The trauma seems to have affected her memory, but I'm hoping maybe you've heard something through your networks about Lycan presence in that area. We need to find whoever attacked her or she's going to die from the venom in her system. The world tilted sideways as Tyler processed information that could only mean one thing: the girl he'd attacked had survived. Against all logic and probability, she'd made it through injuries that should have killed her and was now being cared for by his best friend who had no idea he was asking the attacker himself for help tracking down the perpetrator. The irony would have been darkly amusing if Tyler wasn't too busy fighting panic about what this meant for everyone involved. I'll meet you tomorrow, Tyler managed, his voice sounding distant even to his own ears. Send me the details. And Justin, don't mention this to anyone else yet. If there's a rogue Lycan attacking werewolves, we need to handle this carefully before it becomes a diplomatic incident that escalates existing tensions. He ended the call and stood frozen at the window while his mind raced through implications and options and the slowly dawning horror of what fate had just arranged. He was going to come face to face with the girl he'd nearly murdered. She was his mate. He'd felt the bond snap into place during those terrible moments of attack, had recognized her even through his grief-induced madness as the one person in the world who was supposed to be his perfect match. And he'd nearly killed her. Had marked her with his bite and created a bond that was now poisoning her because he was too terrified and guilt-ridden to reveal himself as her attacker. What's wrong? Zelda asked, clearly reading the panic in his expression. What did Justin say? The girl I attacked, Tyler replied, his voice hollow. She's alive. And she's my mate. And Justin just asked me to help track down the Lycan who nearly killed her, not knowing he's talking to that Lycan. I don't even know how to describe what this is except catastrophically complicated in ways that are going to destroy everything the moment the truth comes out. Then don't let the truth come out, Zelda said immediately, her tactical mind already working through strategies for damage control. At least not yet. She doesn't remember you, right? That gives you time. You can help her heal, provide the blood she needs without revealing who you actually are, and then figure out the rest later. After she's safe. After the immediate crisis is resolved. It was terrible advice that prioritized self-preservation over honesty, but Tyler found himself nodding because the alternative, immediately confessing to Justin and the girl that he was her attacker, felt impossible to contemplate. He wasn't ready to face that truth, wasn't ready to see the horror and betrayal in Justin's eyes or the fear in hers when she realized the person she needed to survive was the same person who'd nearly killed her. So he would lie. Would pretend to help while actually being the solution. Would save her life while keeping the truth buried as long as possible. It was cowardice dressed up as protection, but Tyler had already proven himself capable of terrible choices when consumed by emotion. What was one more moral compromise added to the list of sins he'd committed in recent weeks? The next morning, Tyler arrived at the cafe where Justin had suggested they meet, his nerves stretched tight with anticipation and dread in equal measure. Justin was already there, and seated across from him was a young woman whose face Tyler recognized immediately despite having only seen it briefly during the attack that had changed both their lives forever. Ariana looked fragile in ways that had nothing to do with physical weakness and everything to do with recent trauma still etched in the shadows under her eyes and the careful way she held her body as if movement might trigger pain. Her dark hair fell around her face in waves that partially obscured her expression, but when she looked up and her gray eyes met Tyler's, He felt the mate bond slam into place with force that nearly drove him to his knees. She was beautiful. She was damaged. She was his. And she had absolutely no idea who he was. "Tyler, this is Ariana," Justin said, gesturing between them with the comfortable ease of someone who believed he was simply introducing friends rather than bringing together attacker and victim in cosmic joke that fate seemed to find endlessly amusing. "Ariana, this is Tyler. He's the Lycan King and one of my oldest friends. If anyone can help us track down who attacked you, it's him." Tyler forced himself to remain calm, to extend his hand for a polite handshake while every instinct screamed at him to pull her close and never let go. "It's nice to meet you," he managed, the lie tasting like ash. "Justin told me about your attack. I'm sorry you went through that. We'll find whoever did this." Ariana's hand was small in his, her skin warm despite the pallor that suggested her body was still fighting the venom trying to kill her from the inside out. "Thank you," she said quietly, her voice carrying the same roughness he remembered from the night of the attack. "I appreciate any help you can offer. I need to find him. Whoever bit me. I'm running out of time." The desperation in her voice cut through Tyler's defenses more effectively than any accusation could have. She was dying because of him, slowly poisoning because he was too much of a coward to admit what he'd done and provide the blood that would save her life. Every hour he delayed was another hour of her suffering, another moment of her life slipping away while he prioritized his own fear over her survival. "I'll help you," Tyler said, and meant it even though his help would require deception that went against every principle he'd been taught as king. "But I think it would be better if you came to stay with me. My resources for tracking rogue Lycans are better in the city, and I have medical facilities that can help manage your symptoms while we search. It's not safe for you to stay in human territory without proper supernatural medical support." Justin frowned slightly, clearly uncertain about sending Ariana into the care of someone else even if that someone was his trusted friend. But Ariana surprised them both by nodding agreement without hesitation, her practical survival instinct overriding any concerns about propriety or safety. "If it means finding answers faster, I'll do it," she said firmly. "I don't have time to waste on being cautious. I need to survive, and if staying with you increases those chances, then that's what I'll do." And so it was arranged. Ariana would move into Tyler's penthouse where he could monitor her condition and provide treatment that was actually just carefully disguised doses of his own blood mixed into medications that would keep her from recognizing what she was receiving. He would save her life while lying about his identity, protect her while keeping secret the fact that he was the source of her danger, and somewhere in the process probably fall completely in love with a woman who would hate him the moment she learned the truth. But that was a problem for future Tyler to handle. Present Tyler was just focused on keeping her alive long enough to worry about whether she'd ever be able to forgive him. As Ariana gathered her few belongings to prepare for the move, as Justin extracted promises from Tyler to keep her safe, as Zelda watched the whole arrangement with expression that suggested she thought they were all making terrible decisions that would end in disaster, Tyler felt the weight of his choices settling on his shoulders like chains he'd forged himself. He was going to save her. He was going to lie to her. And eventually he was going to lose her when the truth came out. But at least she'd be alive to hate him. That would have to be enough. Living in Tyler's penthouse was like existing in a beautiful cage designed by someone who understood luxury but had forgotten what freedom felt like. The apartment occupied the top floor of a building that overlooked the city in all directions, floor-to-ceiling windows offering views that would have been breathtaking if Ariana had possessed the emotional capacity to appreciate them beyond their aesthetic value. Instead, she found herself spending hours staring at the lights below while trying to ignore the increasingly insistent pull she felt toward the man who'd offered her sanctuary while hiding truths that would probably destroy her the moment they came to light. Tyler was attentive in ways that felt both comforting and dangerous, his presence triggering responses in her body that she didn't understand and couldn't control. Whenever he was near, bringing her meals he claimed would help with her symptoms, checking her wounds that were healing with suspicious speed, simply existing in the same room while she tried to read or watch television or do anything except think about the fact that she was dying. Ariana felt her pulse quicken and her skin heat and something deep in her chest respond to him like he was magnetic north and she was a compass that had finally found its proper orientation. "How are you feeling today?" Tyler asked one morning, entering the living room where Ariana had spent the night curled on the couch because her bedroom had felt too isolated and she'd been craving proximity to someone even if that someone was a virtual stranger who'd offered help for reasons she still didn't entirely understand. "Better," Ariana admitted, sitting up and trying to smooth her sleep-tangled hair into something resembling presentable. "The pain is less intense. The wounds are healing faster than they should be according to what I know about werewolf biology." Whatever treatment you've been giving me seems to be working. What she didn't mention was the dreams. Every night since moving into Tyler's space, her sleep had been invaded by vivid sequences that felt more like memories than simple imagination. Running through a forest, feeling terror and pain, seeing massive jaws descending toward her shoulder. But mixed with the horror were other images that didn't fit the narrative of being attacked. Strong arms catching her before she hit the ground, a voice speaking words she couldn't quite hear but that sounded like apologies, gentle hands checking her wounds with the kind of care that contradicted the violence that had inflicted them. Tyler's expression flickered with something that might have been guilt before settling back into careful neutrality. That's good. The treatment is designed to counteract the venom while helping your body complete the healing process that was interrupted by the attack. You're responding better than I expected, actually. At this rate, you might be fully recovered within another week. He didn't mention that the treatment was actually his blood, carefully measured doses mixed into drinks and medications that would keep her from recognizing the taste or scent. Every time he watched her consume it, every time he saw her body strengthen and heal because of him, Tyler felt the mate bond tightening until he could barely breathe around the weight of longing and guilt that made every interaction feel like he was being torn apart from the inside out. "Can I ask you something?" Ariana said suddenly, her gray eyes fixing on Tyler with intensity that suggested she'd been building courage for this question for days. "Why are you helping me? You don't know me. Justin says you're the Lycan King, which means you have responsibilities and concerns that should be far more important than one injured werewolf who can't even remember who attacked her. So why go to all this trouble? What do you get out of this?" The question was fair, the suspicion behind it absolutely justified, and Tyler found himself scrambling for an answer that would sound plausible without revealing truths he wasn't ready to share. "Because it's the right thing to do," he said finally, which was true if incomplete. "Because an injured person needed help and I had resources to provide it. Because..." He stopped, then decided to offer a truth that existed alongside his lies. "Because the moment I met you, I felt like helping you was the most important thing I could possibly do. I can't explain it better than that." Ariana studied him for a long moment, her expression cycling through doubt and hope and something that looked disturbingly like recognition despite her amnesia about the attack. "I feel it too," she admitted quietly, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment at the confession. "This connection, I guess. Whenever you're near, my wolf calms down in ways she doesn't with anyone else. My body responds to you like it knows you even though my mind insists we're strangers. Is that normal? Or is it something to do with the venom, some kind of side effect of nearly dying?" "It's not the venom," Tyler replied, his voice rough with emotion he couldn't quite suppress. He stopped himself before the truth could spill out, before he could tell her they were mates and that the bond between them was sacred and permanent and exactly why her wolf recognized him despite her conscious mind having no memory of their meeting. "I feel it too. The connection. I don't entirely understand it either, but it's real. And it's not something you need to be afraid of or fight against. Just let it be what it is. We'll figure out what it means when you're healed and safe." The tension between them had been building steadily, growing stronger with each passing day as Ariana's health improved and the mate bond strengthened in response to proximity and her body's healing. Tyler had been fighting it with every ounce of self-control he possessed, determined not to take advantage of her vulnerability or the amnesia that kept her from knowing he was the source of her trauma. But the bond didn't care about his guilt or his attempts at honor. It wanted what it wanted, and what it wanted was for them to complete the mating that had been interrupted by violence and fear. 3 nights later, the bond's demands finally overwhelmed Tyler's restraint. Ariana had been fully healed for 2 days, her body strong and healthy again, and the venom that had been poisoning her system was completely neutralized by the blood Tyler had been secretly providing. She should have been preparing to leave, should have been making plans to return to Justin's home or track down her old pack or do anything except continue living in this strange suspended reality with a man who made her feel things she didn't understand. But she didn't leave. Couldn't seem to make herself walk away from Tyler even though every rational part of her mind insisted she should be maintaining distance and protecting her heart from the inevitable pain that came from getting attached to someone who probably saw her as nothing more than a responsibility to discharge. Tyler found her standing at the windows that night, staring out at the city lights with expression that held longing mixed with confusion. He'd meant to simply check on her before retiring to his own room where he could continue the nightly ritual of fighting his instincts and reminding himself why taking advantage of her amnesia would be unforgivable. But when she turned to look at him, when her gray eyes met his and he saw the same desperate need reflected back that had been consuming him for weeks, Tyler's carefully maintained control finally shattered completely. "I can't keep fighting this," he said roughly, crossing the room in 3 long strides that brought him directly into her personal space. This connection between us, I've been trying to maintain distance, trying to be honorable, but I can't. Every moment I'm near you feels like torture, Ariana. Tell me you feel it too. Tell me I'm not alone in this. You're not alone, Ariana whispered, her hands coming up to rest against his chest where she could feel his heart hammering with the same desperate rhythm as her own. I don't understand what this is or why it feels so intense, but I can't stop thinking about you. Can't stop wanting. Her breath caught. I shouldn't want this. I barely know you. But my wolf is screaming that you're mine, and I don't know how to ignore that even though logic says I should. Tyler's restraint, already stretched to breaking point, finally snapped under the weight of her admission. He caught her face between his hands and kissed her with the kind of desperate hunger that came from weeks of denial combined with the mate bond's insistent demands that they complete what fate had started. Ariana responded immediately, her body pressing against his with urgency that suggested she'd been waiting for this just as desperately, her hands fisting in his shirt to pull him closer while she kissed him back with intensity that made rational thought impossible. They moved together toward Tyler's bedroom, shedding clothes along the way with the graceless urgency of people who'd been denying themselves too long. Tyler lifted Ariana easily, her legs wrapping around his waist as he carried her to the bed, and when he laid her down against the dark sheets she looked up at him with eyes that held trust and desire and something deeper that made his chest ache with emotions too complicated to name. Are you sure? He managed to ask, his voice rough and barely recognizable even to himself. Because once we do this, I don't know if I'll be able to let you go, Ariana. This feels like more than just physical. It feels like everything, she finished for him, her hands reaching up to pull him down to her. I know. I feel it too. And I'm sure. Whatever this is, whatever happens after, I need this. I need you. Right now, that's the only truth I'm certain of. What followed was intense and consuming and felt like the universe itself had been waiting for this moment to align properly. Tyler was careful despite his desperate need, mindful of her recently healed injuries and the vulnerability that came from still not fully remembering her attack. But Ariana met him with equal passion, her body responding to his with a kind of perfect synchronization that suggested the mate bond was finally being acknowledged by both parties even if the words to describe it hadn't been spoken yet. When they finally came together completely, when the bond snapped into place with force that made them both cry out with sensation that transcended simple physical pleasure, Tyler felt something fundamental shift in his soul. This was his mate. His queen. The person fate had designed specifically for him, and he'd nearly destroyed her before they'd even had chance to discover what they could be together. They lay tangled together afterward, Ariana's head resting on Tyler's chest while his arms wrapped around her with possessive protectiveness that suggested he had no intention of ever letting go. For a few perfect moments, Tyler allowed himself to simply exist in the contentment of having his mate safe and close, to pretend that the lies between them didn't exist and that this happiness could last beyond the inevitable moment when truth came crashing down around them. But fate had a cruel sense of timing, and peace was never permitted to last when built on foundations of deception. The bedroom door crashed open with violence that sent both Tyler and Ariana scrambling for covers and defensive positions. Zelda stood in the doorway, her expression absolutely livid, her body vibrating with rage that made the air around her practically crackle with supernatural energy. You complete and utter bastard, she snarled at Tyler, her voice carrying the kind of fury that came from betrayal by someone trusted. You slept with her? After what you did? After nearly killing her? How dare you? She doesn't even know, does she? She has no idea that you're the Lycan who attacked her, who marked her, who sent her off that cliff and left her for dead. And you took advantage of her amnesia too. I can't even. Ariana went completely still beside Tyler, her body rigid with shock as Zelda's words penetrated through the post-coital haze and rearranged reality into something that made terrible, horrible sense. The connection she'd felt to Tyler. The way her wolf recognized him. The dreams of being attacked mixed with images of being caught and cared for. It hadn't been random attraction or mysterious fate. It had been the mate bond recognizing her attacker. No, Ariana whispered, pulling away from Tyler with movements that looked mechanical, her eyes wide with horror as she looked at the man she'd just been intimate with and saw him suddenly as the monster from her nightmares. No, that's not, you can't be, tell me she's lying. Tyler, please tell me she's lying. Tyler sat frozen, his expression cycling through panic and guilt and resignation as he realized there was no escape from this moment, no way to soften or redirect or minimize what Zelda had just revealed. I'm sorry, he managed, his voice breaking on the words. Ariana, I'm so sorry. I never meant, the attack wasn't, I was grieving my sister, I wasn't in control, and you were just in the wrong place and You nearly killed me, Ariana interrupted, her voice going cold and flat in ways that were somehow worse than if she'd screamed. You bit me and clawed me and threw me off a cliff. You're the reason I nearly died. The reason I lost my memories. The reason I've been poisoned and suffering for weeks. And then you brought me here and lied to me and, Her breath hitched with something between a sob and a laugh that held no humor whatsoever. I let you touch me. I trusted you. I thought, God, I'm such an idiot. She was out of the bed and grabbing clothes before Tyler could process what was happening, her movements jerky with rage and hurt and betrayal so profound it made breathing difficult. Tyler tried to reach for her, tried to say something that might make this fractionally less catastrophic, but Ariana jerked away from his touch like he was poison. Don't, she said sharply. Don't touch me. Don't talk to me. I need to get out of here. I need to think. I need to. Her voice broke completely, and tears began streaming down her face despite her obvious attempts to maintain composure. How could you? How could you lie to me like that? Make me feel safe with you when you're the person I should fear most in the world. Because I couldn't lose you again, Tyler said desperately, abandoning any attempt at measured explanation in favor of raw honesty. Because the moment I realized you'd survived, the moment I understood we were mates, I knew I'd do anything, lie about anything, to keep you alive and close. I know that's selfish. I know that's wrong. But I can't. I don't care what you can or can't do, Ariana interrupted coldly. I'm leaving. And if you try to stop me, if you try to follow me, I will kill you myself. I don't care if you're the Lycan King. I don't care if we're supposedly mates. You nearly murdered me and then you lied about it while I was vulnerable and trusting. That's unforgivable. We're done. She was dressed and gone before Tyler could formulate response, her footsteps echoing through the penthouse as she ran toward the exit with the same desperate speed she'd used to flee the celebration that had started this entire nightmare sequence. Tyler sat frozen in the bed where minutes ago he'd been experiencing the most intense happiness of his life, Zelda's furious gaze burning into him from the doorway, and felt his world collapse with the same devastating completeness it had when his sister died. He'd finally found his mate. And he'd destroyed any chance they might have had within hours of consummating the bond. The irony would have been darkly amusing if Tyler wasn't too busy feeling like his heart had been physically removed from his chest. Ariana ran through the city streets with tears blurring her vision and rage making her wolf push for dominance despite being in public where transformation would create exactly the kind of scene supernatural beings were supposed to avoid. She barely registered where she was going until she found herself on Justin's doorstep, pounding on the door with enough force to probably wake the entire building while sobs racked her body with the kind of devastation that transcended simple heartbreak. Justin opened the door immediately, his expression shifting from confusion to alarm as he took in Ariana's state. What happened? Are you hurt? Did Tyler? He's the one who attacked me, Ariana said flatly, pushing past Justin into the apartment and collapsing onto his couch with the boneless exhaustion of someone who just had every belief about reality systematically destroyed. Tyler. Your best friend. The person you asked to help me. He's the Lycan who bit me and nearly killed me, and he's been lying about it this entire time while I recovered and trusted him and, her voice broke, and slept with him like the complete idiot I apparently am. Justin went very still, his expression cycling through disbelief and fury before settling on something that looked like he was recalculating everything he thought he knew about his oldest friend. That's not possible. Tyler wouldn't, he's the most honorable person I know. There has to be some kind of mistake or misunderstanding or... His gamma confirmed it, Ariana interrupted. Confronted him right in front of me about how he nearly killed me and then took advantage of my amnesia. There's no misunderstanding, Justin. Tyler attacked me, marked me, created this entire situation. And then he saved me while pretending to be something he wasn't. I can't. She curled into herself, sobbing with the kind of broken desperation that suggested this betrayal had fractured something fundamental in her ability to trust. Justin sat beside her and pulled her into a hug that was meant to comfort but probably couldn't actually address the depth of damage that had just been inflicted. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I'm so sorry I brought you to him. I trusted him completely and that trust nearly got you killed. What do you need? How can I help? I need to remember, Ariana said, her voice muffled against Justin's shoulder. I need my memories back, all of them. I need to understand what actually happened that night, why I was running in the first place, who I was before all this. Can you help me with that? Do you know anyone who can restore memories that trauma blocked? Maybe, Justin replied slowly, his mind clearly working through options. But Ariana, I need to tell you something first. Something about me, about my past. It's relevant to your situation in ways you might not expect. Over the next hour, Justin told Ariana his complete story: the murdered parents, the uncle who'd stolen his pack through violence and treachery, the sealed powers that had kept him trapped in half-existence for years. But he also told her about the changes he'd been experiencing since finding her on the beach, the way his wolf had been stirring in response to her presence, the memories that had been locked away slowly beginning to surface. "I think you're the key," Justin admitted finally. "I think whatever happened to you, whatever Tyler did when he marked you, it created some kind of supernatural resonance that's affecting me too. Your presence is breaking down the seals my uncle installed. If I can help you recover your memories, maybe we can both reclaim what was stolen from us." Ariana processed this information through the haze of emotional devastation, trying to focus on practical concerns rather than the heartbreak that threatened to consume her completely. "Your uncle," she said slowly. "The one who stole your pack. Is he still Alpha? Is he still in power?" "Yes," Justin replied grimly. "Alpha Jason. He's built his authority on lies and murder and suppression of anyone who might challenge him. I've been working toward confronting him for years, but without my powers I couldn't challenge him directly. But now, if you help me break the seals, if I can access my full abilities again, maybe I can finally take back what he stole and make him answer for everything he's done." "Then that's what we'll do," Ariana said with sudden determination, her rage at Tyler finding new outlet in the prospect of helping Justin reclaim his birthright. "We'll work together. We'll break whatever magical locks your uncle installed. We'll recover my memories and your powers. And then we're going to make the people who've hurt us pay for what they've done." It was perhaps not the healthiest response to betrayal and trauma, channeling grief and rage into vengeance rather than processing emotions in constructive ways. But Ariana was too raw for healthy coping mechanisms, too broken to care about whether her choices were wise or sustainable. She just needed something, anything, that would make her feel less powerless, less violated, less like her entire existence had been manipulated by people who saw her as means to ends rather than person deserving of truth and respect. Justin agreed immediately, his own need for justice and reclamation aligning perfectly with Ariana's desire for purpose beyond simple survival. They began working together in earnest, spending hours in meditation and magical exercises designed to weaken the seals on Justin's powers while simultaneously helping Ariana access blocked memories that trauma had hidden from conscious recall. Progress came slowly at first, fragments of recollection surfacing like debris from shipwrecks, images of the celebration, Marcus's rejection, running through the forest. But with each passing day the memories became clearer, more complete, and Ariana began to piece together not just the night of the attack but everything that had led up to it. She'd been so focused on Marcus, so convinced he was the future she wanted, that she'd never bothered to notice the ways her wolf had been restless around him, the way her instincts had been trying to warn her he wasn't her mate. And then the rejection, the humiliation, the flight into the forest where she'd crossed paths with a grieving Lycan King whose control had shattered at precisely the wrong moment. But alongside the horror of the attack, Ariana's recovering memories also showed her something else. The moment after the bite when Tyler had seemed to recognize what he'd done, the way he'd tried to catch her before she went over the cliff, the sound of his voice screaming her name as she fell. The attack had been terrible, unforgivable, a violation she had every right to rage against. But it had also been a tragic accident rather than calculated cruelty, grief-induced madness rather than deliberate malice. That understanding didn't excuse what Tyler had done, didn't make the lies acceptable or the betrayal less painful. But it complicated her rage in ways that made simple hatred impossible despite her best efforts to maintain uncomplicated anger. Meanwhile, Tyler was spiraling in his penthouse, his attempts to contact Ariana blocked at every turn, his messages unanswered, his presence clearly unwanted in ways that made him feel like he was dying slowly from the inside out. The mate bond stretched between them like an open wound, carrying echoes of her pain and rage that made his own guilt intensify until he could barely function through the weight of self-hatred. "You need to give her space," Zelda advised, her earlier rage at his deception having cooled into something approaching sympathy mixed with exasperation. "You lied to her. Took advantage of her vulnerability. She has every right to hate you right now. Pushing for contact before she's ready will only make things worse." "I can't just leave things like this," Tyler argued desperately. "She's my mate. The bond is, every moment we're apart feels like being torn in half. I need to explain. Need to make her understand that the attack wasn't, that I never meant." "What you meant doesn't matter as much as what you did," Zelda interrupted firmly. "You nearly killed her. That's the reality she's dealing with. Your intentions, your grief, your remorse. All of that is secondary to the fact that you attacked her and then lied about it for weeks. She needs time to process that. You owe her that much at least. Tyler knew Zelda was right, but knowing something intellectually and being able to accept it emotionally were entirely different challenges. Every instinct demanded he go to Ariana, force her to listen, make her understand that he'd never wanted any of this to happen. But he also knew that forcing anything on her after already violating her trust so completely would be the final destruction of any chance they might have for eventual reconciliation. So he waited. Suffered through the bond's accusations and the guilt that consumed him and the knowledge that he'd destroyed the most important relationship of his existence through his own cowardice and deception. And hoped that somehow, eventually, Ariana might find a way to forgive him for sins that probably didn't deserve forgiveness. 6 weeks after fleeing Tyler's penthouse, Ariana stood in front of the mirror in Justin's guest bathroom and tried to process the evidence her body was presenting with stubborn persistence despite her mind's attempts at denial. The pregnancy test sitting on the counter showed results that were unmistakable, undeniable, and absolutely catastrophic given current circumstances. She was carrying Tyler's child, conceived during that one night when she trusted him completely before learning he was the source of all her trauma. "This can't be happening," she whispered to her reflection, her hands trembling as she pressed them against her still flat stomach where new life was apparently already establishing itself. "This absolutely cannot be happening right now." But the mate bond didn't care about her timing preferences or her complicated feelings about the father. It had recognized Tyler as her perfect match and had apparently wasted no time in ensuring their bloodlines merged whether she was emotionally prepared for that or not. The pregnancy was real, undeniable, and growing stronger every day as supernatural biology accelerated the process beyond normal human timelines. "Ariana?" Justin's voice came through the bathroom door, concerned and gentle. "Are you okay? You've been in there a while." She opened the door and wordlessly handed him the pregnancy test, watching his expression cycle through confusion and realization before settling on something that looked like sympathy mixed with concern about implications neither of them wanted to fully examine yet. "Tyler's?" he asked quietly, though they both knew the answer. "Who else's?" Ariana replied with bitter humor. "I haven't been with anyone except the Lycan King who nearly murdered me and then lied about it while I was vulnerable. Apparently fate has a truly terrible sense of humor and decided I needed one more complication added to an already impossibly complex situation." Justin pulled her into a hug that was meant to be comforting but probably couldn't actually address the magnitude of what she was dealing with. "What do you want to do?" he asked carefully. "About the pregnancy, about Tyler, about everything. Whatever you decide, I'll support you. But Ariana, you're going to have to tell him eventually. He's the father. He has a right to know, even if you decide you don't want him in the child's life." "I know," Ariana said miserably, her hands still pressed against her stomach in unconscious protective gesture. "I know I need to tell him. I don't know if I can face him yet. Every time I think about him, I remember the attack and the lies and the betrayal. But I also remember," her voice dropped, "how safe I felt with him. How right it seemed when we were together. How my wolf still insists he's ours despite everything my mind knows about what he did. It's tortured Justin. Loving and hating someone simultaneously. Not knowing whether to forgive or run or just give up entirely and let fate make all my decisions for me." Before Justin could respond, before he could offer advice that would probably be well-intentioned but ultimately inadequate, the apartment security system chimed with alert that someone was attempting to bypass the locks. Both Ariana and Justin tensed immediately, their supernatural instincts recognizing potential threat even before the door burst open and Tyler stood in the entrance looking like he'd run the entire distance from his penthouse to Justin's apartment without bothering to shift or use any civilized transportation. "Ariana," Tyler said, his voice rough and desperate. "Please. I need to talk to you. I know you hate me. I know I don't deserve your time or attention or anything except your rage. But please just let me explain. Let me tell you everything that happened that night. Let me—" He stopped, his enhanced senses apparently catching something in the apartment's air that made his entire body go rigid. "You're pregnant." It wasn't a question. His Lycan abilities had detected the hormonal changes before Ariana had even confirmed it herself, had recognized his own child growing in her womb with the kind of certainty that made denial impossible. His expression cycled through shock and wonder and fierce protectiveness before settling on something that looked like determination mixed with hope that seemed wildly inappropriate given their circumstances. "Get out," Ariana said coldly, her body positioning itself between Tyler and the door in ways that suggested she was seriously considering running again. You can't just, I'm not having this conversation with you. Not now. Not when I just found out myself and haven't even processed what it means yet. It means we're having a child together, Tyler replied, moving into the apartment with slow, careful steps like approaching a spooked animal. It means fate isn't done with us yet, regardless of how badly I've screwed up everything else. Ariana, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for the attack, for the lies, for taking advantage of your amnesia. I'm sorry for every choice I made that hurt you. But I can't be sorry about this. His hand gestured toward her stomach. I can't regret the child we created, even if the circumstances were terrible. That's our future growing inside you. Our second chance at getting this right. This isn't a second chance, Ariana snapped, her voice carrying harmonics that suggested her wolf was very close to the surface despite being in Justin's apartment where transformation would create complications neither of them needed. This is a consequence of your lies and my stupidity. I don't want your apologies or your hope or your assumptions about what comes next. I want you to leave me alone so I can figure out what I'm going to do without your presence making everything more complicated than it already is. I'm not leaving, Tyler said flatly, his own stubbornness finally showing through the desperate pleading. You're carrying my child. That makes you my responsibility whether you want me involved or not. I'm not going to abandon you or our baby just because you're angry at me, justifiably angry. I'm not denying that, but anger doesn't change the fundamental reality that we're bound together now in ways that go beyond just the mate bond. You attacked her, Justin interrupted, his voice carrying warning that suggested his patience with Tyler's presence had limits regardless of their friendship. Nearly killed her. Lied to her for weeks. And now you're standing in my apartment acting like you have any right to make demands about her choices or her future. You need to leave, Tyler. Now, before I make you leave. The tension between the two men escalated rapidly, supernatural power crackling in the air as both of them prepared for confrontation that would probably destroy Justin's apartment and potentially kill any humans unfortunate enough to be in the surrounding units. But before violence could erupt, before ancient friendship could be shattered alongside furniture and walls, Ariana's voice cut through the building aggression with authority that surprised everyone including herself. Stop, she commanded, her gray eyes blazing with power that suggested her wolf had finally decided to assert dominance over a situation that was spiraling toward disaster. Both of you. Justin, I appreciate you defending me, but I can handle this myself. And Tyler, she turned to face him fully, her expression holding mixture of pain and determination. You want to explain? Want to tell me your side of what happened that night? Fine. I'll listen. What? But then you're going to respect my decision about what comes next, whether that includes you or not. Because this is my life. My body. My child. And I'm done with men making choices on my behalf without my input or consent. Tyler nodded immediately, relief washing over his features in ways that suggested he'd been prepared for her to refuse entirely. Thank you. That's all I'm asking for, a chance to explain. To tell you the truth about that night, about why I lied, about everything. After that, after you've heard everything, I'll respect whatever decision you make, even if it destroys me. They moved to Justin's living room with the awkward formality of people preparing for difficult conversation that would probably reshape relationships permanently regardless of outcome. Ariana sat in the armchair that offered maximum distance from both men while Justin positioned himself near enough to intervene if Tyler's explanation ventured into territory that seemed manipulative or threatening. Tyler stood rather than sitting, his body language suggesting he was too agitated for stillness, his hands flexing at his sides like he was fighting the urge to reach for Ariana despite knowing physical contact would be rejected. My sister died 3 weeks before I attacked you, Tyler began, his voice rough with grief that was clearly still raw despite time's passage. She was murdered by werewolf extremists who decided Lycans were abominations that needed to be eliminated. They tortured her for days before finally killing her, and they left her body on packed borders as a message about what happens to supernatural beings who claim authority they don't deserve. His voice broke. I loved her more than anything. She was my closest friend, my advisor, the person who kept me grounded when royal responsibilities threatened to consume me. And she died in agony because some fanatics decided her existence was offensive to their ideological purity. Ariana felt her anger wavering slightly despite her determination to maintain emotional distance. She understood grief's capacity to destroy rational thought, understood how losing someone beloved could shatter control in ways that made people do things they'd never otherwise consider. But understanding wasn't the same as excusing, and she forced herself to maintain hard expression even as sympathy tried to soften her defenses. "I'm sorry about your sister," she said carefully. "That's genuinely terrible and I understand why it would affect you profoundly. But grief doesn't justify attacking innocent people, Tyler. It doesn't excuse what you did to me." "I know," Tyler replied immediately. "I'm not trying to excuse it. I'm trying to explain it. The night I attacked you, I'd been at a memorial service for my sister. Seeing her body prepared for burial, listening to speeches about her life and death, processing the reality that she was actually gone, it broke something in me. I shifted without meaning to and ran into the forest because I needed to escape, needed to move, needed to do something with the rage building in my chest that felt like it might actually kill me if I didn't find outlet for it." He paused, his expression distant as he clearly relived memories that were painful in entirely different ways than Ariana's recollections of the same night. "I scented werewolf, not Lycan, and something in my grief-addled mind decided that attacking a werewolf would somehow balance the scales for my sister's murder. It made no sense. You hadn't done anything. You weren't connected to the extremists who killed her. But grief and rage don't operate on logic, Ariana. They operate on pain seeking any outlet available, and you were there. So I was convenient," Ariana said flatly, her anger reigniting despite the sympathy she'd been feeling moments ago. "I was in the wrong place at the wrong time, and you decided I'd make a good target for working through your emotional trauma. That's supposed to make me feel better about nearly dying?" "No," Tyler replied, his voice dropping to barely above whisper. "Nothing about this is supposed to make you feel better. But I need you to understand, the moment I bit you, the moment my teeth sank into your shoulder, I felt the mate bond snap into place. Even through my madness, even while grief was controlling my actions, I recognized you as mine. And I tried to stop. Tried to catch you before you went over the cliff. But momentum carried us both forward and you fell and I..." His voice broke completely. "I destroyed the most important person in my existence before I even knew who you were. That's something I'm going to carry for the rest of my life, regardless of whether you ever forgive me." Ariana sat silent for a long moment, processing Tyler's explanation and trying to reconcile it with her own memories that had been gradually returning over the past weeks. She remembered the attack, the pain and terror and the sensation of falling, but she also remembered something else. The moment before she hit the water, she'd heard Tyler's voice screaming her name with anguish that suggested he understood exactly what he'd done and was horrified by it. "Why did you lie?" she asked finally, focusing on the deception that had felt like worse betrayal than the attack itself in some ways. "When Justin asked you to help find my attacker, why didn't you just tell the truth? Why bring me to your home and treat me while pretending to be someone you weren't?" "Because I'm a coward," Tyler admitted with brutal honesty. "Because I couldn't face telling you the truth and seeing the horror in your eyes. Because I convinced myself that keeping you alive was more important than being honest, that saving you would somehow balance the scales for nearly killing you. And because," he met her eyes directly, "because I was already falling in love with you and I knew the truth would make you hate me. I chose my own emotional preservation over your right to informed consent about who was treating you. That was selfish and wrong and completely unforgivable." The admission hung in the air between them, raw honesty that was somehow both appealing and frustrating. Ariana appreciated the truth-telling but also recognized that Tyler's self-awareness about his flaws didn't actually undo the damage those flaws had caused. He'd hurt her terribly through both action and deception, and recognizing that didn't automatically create path toward forgiveness. "I don't know if I can forgive you," Ariana said quietly, her hand unconsciously moving to rest on her stomach where their child grew. "I don't know if what you did is something that's forgivable, even understanding the grief and fear that motivated your choices. You nearly killed me, Tyler. You lied to me. You took advantage of my vulnerability and amnesia. Those are facts that don't change regardless of how sorry you are or how much you claim to love me." "I know," Tyler replied, his expression holding resignation mixed with desperate hope. "I'm not asking for immediate forgiveness or even eventual forgiveness. I'm just asking for a chance. To prove that I'm more than the worst thing I've ever done. To show you that the man you felt safe with in those weeks before you knew the truth is also real, also part of who I am. To be there for you and our child, even if being there means maintaining distance and respecting boundaries you set." Before Ariana could respond, before she could articulate the complicated tangle of emotions that made simple yes or no responses impossible, Justin cleared his throat with the awkward timing of someone about to add complications to already complex situation. "This is relevant," Justin said carefully, addressing both Ariana and Tyler. "My uncle, Alpha Jason, the one who stole my pack and sealed my powers, he's been monitoring Ariana since she arrived in my territory. He knows about her connection to Tyler, knows about the pregnancy, and he's planning something. I don't know exactly what yet, but my sources say he's gathering forces and making alliances that suggest he's preparing for some kind of major move. Why would your uncle care about Ariana? Tyler asked immediately, his protective instincts clearly triggering at suggestion of threat to his mate. What does she have to do with his power plays? Because I think she's the key to unlocking my sealed abilities, Justin admitted, his expression holding guilt about revealing this information. Ever since she arrived, ever since I started helping her recover, I've been feeling my wolf stirring in ways it hasn't since my uncle sealed it years ago. Ariana's presence, specifically her bond with Tyler and the pregnancy, it's creating some kind of supernatural resonance that's weakening the magical locks Jason installed. And if my uncle has figured that out, then he'll want to eliminate her before she can help you reclaim what he stole, Tyler finished grimly. Which means we need to move against him first. Justin, if you're serious about confronting your uncle and taking back your pack, now is the time. While he's still gathering forces. Before he has chance to act on whatever he's planning for Ariana. You want to help me? Justin asked, his tone suggesting genuine surprise mixed with suspicion about Tyler's motivations. After everything? After I basically accused you of being monster who took advantage of Ariana? You were right, Tyler replied simply. I did take advantage of her. I am a monster at least where my attack on her is concerned. But I'm also your friend, and I'm also the father of Ariana's child, and I'm also Lycan King with resources that could be useful in overthrowing an alpha who stole his position through violence and treachery. Personal complications aside, this is the right thing to do. So yes, I want to help. If Ariana will allow it. All eyes turned to Ariana, who sat processing the rapid escalation of her situation from personal crisis to apparently being central figure in supernatural political drama that could reshape pack dynamics across multiple territories. Part of her wanted to refuse involvement entirely, to retreat somewhere safe and focus on the pregnancy without dealing with Tyler's guilt or Justin's reclamation quest or Alpha Jason's mysterious plans. But she'd learned over recent weeks that safety was illusion when you were supernatural being caught between competing power structures, and the only real security came from having allies strong enough to protect you when threats inevitably emerged. I'll help, Ariana said finally, her voice steady despite the uncertainty churning in her stomach. Justin has been there for me when I had nothing. If helping him means confronting his uncle, then that's what I'll do. And Tyler? She met his eyes directly. You can be involved in fighting Jason and helping Justin. You can even be involved with our child, eventually if you prove you're capable of honesty and respect for boundaries. But we're not together. We're not mates in any way except biologically. You nearly killed me and that's not something I can just move past because we're having a baby together. You need to accept that and respect it. The pain that flashed across Tyler's face was visceral and immediate, but he nodded acceptance without argument. Understood. Whatever terms you set, I'll respect them. Thank you. For letting me be involved at all. That's more than I deserve and I won't take it for granted. They spent the next several days planning their approach to confronting Alpha Jason, gathering intelligence about his forces and identifying potential allies who might support Justin's claim to leadership if he could prove his powers had been restored. Ariana participated in the planning while trying to manage pregnancy symptoms that were already manifesting despite early stage of development, her supernatural biology accelerating the process in ways that made morning sickness and fatigue hit with intensity that left her exhausted and irritable. Tyler was constantly present during planning sessions, his protective instincts making it impossible for him to maintain the distance Ariana had requested. He brought her food when she was too nauseated to eat normally, provided heating pads when cramps made sitting through long meetings torture, generally hovered in ways that were simultaneously annoying and appreciated despite Ariana's determination to maintain emotional walls between them. You need to stop, she told him one evening after he'd intercepted her fifth attempt to get coffee that her pregnancy made inadvisable. I appreciate the care, but I'm not helpless. I can manage my own pregnancy without constant supervision. I know you can, Tyler replied quietly. But taking care of you is the only thing I can do right now that feels like maybe I'm not completely useless. You won't let me close emotionally, which is fair and you're right, but at least let me help practically. Please. The vulnerability in his voice undermined Ariana's determination to maintain distance, reminded her of the man she'd fallen for before learning the truth about his identity. This was the Tyler she trusted, the one who'd been attentive and gentle and protective in ways that had made her feel cherished. That version coexisted with the Tyler who'd attacked her, and reconciling those two realities remained challenge she hadn't figured out how to manage. Fine, she said with a sigh that was half exasperation and half capitulation. You can help. But Tyler, helping doesn't mean we're together. Doesn't mean I've forgiven you or that we're going to raise this child as couple. It just means I'm accepting practical support while maintaining emotional boundaries. Can you handle that? I can handle whatever you need me to handle, Tyler replied with certainty that suggested he'd accept any terms that kept him in her orbit. Even if it destroys me to be near you without being with you. Our child deserves a father who's present and involved, and you deserve support during pregnancy regardless of our complicated history. That's enough for now. The assault on Alpha Jason's stronghold came 3 weeks later, when their intelligence suggested he was away from his main base of operations meeting with allies and would have reduced security presence. Justin led the charge with Tyler at his side, and Ariana followed despite both men's protests about her safety given the pregnancy. She refused to be sidelined when her presence was apparently necessary for breaking the seals on Justin's abilities. The confrontation when it came was brutal and chaotic, Jason's remaining forces fighting with desperate ferocity of people who knew their positions would be eliminated if Justin successfully reclaimed his pack. But Tyler's Lycan warriors combined with Justin's gathering of dispossessed wolves and other allies created force that overwhelmed Jason's defenders through superior numbers and coordination. The real battle happened in Jason's ritual chamber, where the Alpha had apparently been conducting dark magic experiments designed to permanently seal supernatural abilities in anyone who might threaten his authority. Ariana stood with Justin in the center of complex magical array while Tyler and his forces held off Jason's elite guards, and she felt power flowing through her, drawn from the pregnancy, from her bond with Tyler, from her own awakening abilities that trauma and transformation had been developing without her conscious awareness. Now, Justin said urgently, his hands gripping Ariana's as power surged between them. I can feel the seals breaking. My wolf it's actually... His transformation when it came was explosive and beautiful, years of suppressed power finally finding release in ways that shook the entire building with its force. Justin's wolf emerged larger and more magnificent than anyone had anticipated, Alpha presence rolling off him in waves that made even Tyler's Lycans pause and reassess threat levels. Alpha Jason appeared in the doorway of his ritual chamber, his expression cycling rapidly from confidence to concern as he registered what was happening. No, he said flatly, as if denial could somehow reverse reality unfolding before him. I sealed those abilities permanently. There's no way you could. You underestimated how much I wanted them back, Justin replied, his voice carrying harmonics that suggested his wolf had integrated seamlessly with his human consciousness. You underestimated how far I'd go to reclaim what you stole. And you definitely underestimated Ariana. She's the key you never knew existed, the variable your careful plans never accounted for. The battle between Justin and Jason was brief but decisive, years of suppressed rage finding outlet through supernatural violence that left no question about who would emerge victorious. When Jason finally fell, when his reign built on murder and deception finally ended, the assembled wolves recognized Justin's claim to alpha authority through mechanisms older than language, pack bonds shifting and reforming around new leader who'd proven his right to rule through strength and determination. In the aftermath, as Justin's new pack began the complicated process of restructuring after years of corrupt leadership, as Tyler's forces prepared to return to their own territories, Ariana found herself alone with Tyler for first time in weeks. They stood together on the balcony of Jason's former stronghold, now Justin's headquarters, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and gold. Thank you, Tyler said quietly, his shoulder nearly touching hers despite maintained distance between them. For helping Justin. For being involved despite the risks. For allowing me to be part of this even peripherally. You're the father of my child, Ariana replied, her hand resting on her stomach where their baby grew stronger every day. That makes you part of my life whether either of us wanted it that way or not. But Tyler, I still don't know if I can forgive what you did. The attack. The lies. All of it. I know, he said, and there was acceptance in his voice rather than the desperate hope he'd carried for weeks. I know I may never earn your forgiveness. But I want to try. I want to be the father our child deserves. I want to be the mate you needed from the beginning instead of the monster who nearly killed you. If you'll let me try, even knowing I might fail, I swear I'll spend the rest of my existence trying to be worthy of the second chance you're giving me. Ariana looked at him, really looked, seeing not just the attacker or the liar but also the grieving brother and the devoted father-to-be and the man who'd held her like she was precious when she'd had no idea who he really was. The path forward wasn't clear, might never be simple or easy, but she understood something fundamental. Running from this would solve nothing. They were bound by biology and fate and a child who deserved parents willing to work through their complications. "You can try," she said finally, her voice carrying finality that suggested decision had been reached rather than temporarily postponed. "But Tyler, you need to understand something. I'm not choosing you because of the mate bond or the pregnancy or because I've forgiven what you did. I'm choosing to give you chance to prove you're more than your worst actions because our child deserves parents who at least tried to make this work. That's all I can offer right now." "That's enough," Tyler replied, his hand slowly reaching for hers and pausing to give her opportunity to pull away. When she didn't, when she let his fingers intertwine with hers, he felt hope kindle in his chest for first time since the truth had destroyed everything between them. "That's more than enough. I love you, Ariana. I'll spend forever proving that if you'll let me." She didn't say she loved him back, wasn't ready for that level of vulnerability yet, but she didn't pull her hand away either. Just stood beside him watching the sunset while their child grew inside her and their future stretched ahead full of possibilities both terrifying and hopeful. Behind them, Justin appeared in the doorway with expression that held gratitude mixed with concern. "You two okay out here?" he asked carefully, clearly uncertain about whether he was interrupting private moment or providing welcome excuse for Ariana to escape. "We're okay," Ariana replied and found she actually meant it. They weren't fixed, weren't perfect, weren't even entirely sure what they were to each other beyond biologically bound. But they were trying, and sometimes trying was all anyone could reasonably ask for. As stars began appearing in the darkening sky, as the supernatural world continued turning with all its complications and dramas and ongoing political reshuffling, Ariana felt her daughter move for the first time. A flutter so subtle she might have imagined it, except Tyler's hand tightened on hers and his expression suggested he'd felt it too through the mate bond that connected them regardless of conscious choices about their relationship. They were going to be parents. Were going to navigate this impossibly complex situation together whether they wanted to or not. And somehow, despite everything that had gone wrong, Ariana found herself believing that maybe, just maybe, they'd figure out how to make it work. Not because fate demanded it. Not because the mate bond insisted. But because they both loved their child enough to become better people than trauma had tried to make them. And that, Ariana understood, was probably the best foundation they could hope for. Discover more supernatural romance. If The Girl Who Fell captured your heart, you won't want to miss. Subscribe for exclusive bonus content. Extended epilogues showing Ariana and Tyler's journey as new parents, Justin's rule as the new alpha, and the supernatural politics that follow Jason's fall. Explore the extended universe. Discover stories about other pack members, learn more about Lycan history and the ancient prophecies that shaped Tyler's world, and find out what happens when their daughter inherits abilities from both parents. Join our community. Connect with other readers who love complex anti-heroes, redemption arcs, and supernatural romance that doesn't shy away from real consequences. Leave your review. Your feedback helps other readers discover stories they'll love and helps us create more content featuring the characters and themes you're passionate about. Coming soon. The Lycan King's Redemption. Tyler and Ariana's complete journey from tragedy to triumph. Alpha's reclamation. Justin's story continues as he rebuilds his pack and faces threats from Jason's surviving allies. Daughter of Two Worlds. The next generation discovers what it means to be born of both Lycan and werewolf bloodlines. Stay connected for weekly updates. New stories, character insights, and exclusive supernatural world-building content delivered straight to you. Subscribe now so you never miss a chapter in this epic supernatural saga. Thank you for reading. Your support makes these stories possible, and your engagement with these characters means everything. May you always find the courage to forgive, the strength to try again, and the wisdom to know when second chances are worth taking. Until the next moon rises.